Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving year 2000. We're interviewing my dad, Alfred Dubinsky. So we're going to start with some basic questions here. Okay. First question, tell us where and when you were born.
I was born in Providence, Rhode Island in 1926.
What? What? Oh, good. So, tell us, where did you grow up?
Grew up mainly in Hartford, actually in Hartford, Connecticut.
So when did you go from Providence to Hartford?
When I was around 5 years old, I guess. Don't remember.
Okay. And what's your earliest memory?
Well, I remembered a little bit in Providence.
What do you remember there?
I remember we lived in a three-story tenement, and we had to pack the garbage in order to send it down the dumb waiter for the garbage collectors. And I thought I wanted to be, when I grew up, a garbage collector because he was getting these wrapped presents.
You sort of
I
did.
think it was a bad choice.
Oh. So, tell us about some of maybe your happy memories of while you were growing up.
Did well in school, did well in intramural sports.
What sports did you play? Tell us what sports you played.
Well, played basketball, baseball, football.
Wow.
That's were the basic ones back then.
And tell us about your parents.
My parents?
Yeah.
Father was named Frank Dubinsky. He was born in Russia, came over here as a young man, young child, and at 5 or 6. My mother was Edith Goldfine Dubinsky, and she was from Rhode Island, and her parents lived there. She was born there, and her parents lived in Woonsocket, Rhode Island.
And what do you remember about your grandparents?
I remember them fairly well. They died when I was, the last one died when I was in my early 20s. My father's parents didn't speak English, so that was a difficult time. And my mother's parents, we were there more than my father's, so I knew them a little better.
So your father's parents, what did they speak, Russian or Yiddish?
Yiddish, mainly.
And what were your father's parents' names?
Benjamin, actually Baruch, and Anna.
Okay, and how about your mother's parents? What were their names?
Rose and Max Goldfine.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, let's see, you have one brother. Tell us about your brother.
Brother Bill is 5 years younger, although I really think he looks older. And because of the war, WW2, I went away to the service, and he was in high school, and when I came back, he was in college, and we didn't get close until after we moved out to Palm Desert.
So do you remember fighting with him when you were growing up, or playing with him? Do you remember what sort of a relationship?
Well, 5 years apart, there was the sibling fights, and but never a real closeness until much later.
Okay.
We led different lives.
Do you remember him being like a pest or something around, like the little kid around who was a pest?
Not really.
No?
No.
Okay. So tell us about some, let's see, some world events. Like, do you remember the Depression, being in the Depression?
No, don't remember that at all.
It was later. So were in the war though, in World War II?
Yeah.
What did you do in the war?
Went to school.
You went to
Navy
school.
school. I was in the Navy, and they were putting me through schools of different kinds, electronic school, and then into the college in our OTC program. And at that time, the war was over, and I was discharged.
So did you ever serve in active duty?
That was active duty.
Being in school?
Yes.
But you never like went out on a ship or saw any battlefields or anything?
Never saw any action.
Never saw any action.
Protected the United States, and you notice we didn't have any fatalities here at all during the war.
Well, thank you. Well done, Pops. So Which was your favorite president? You must remember a lot of presidents.
My favorite one, it all depends. Different times there were different favorites. Brought up admiring Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Was not that happy with Harry Truman, but later realized that he was probably one of our greatest presidents. Actually, was very unhappy that Adlai Stevenson never became president because I greatly admired him and supported him during his 2 runs for office.
Okay, so do you remember any world events or political events that particularly captured your notice, things that really were important events?
Well, VJ Day, I was in Bucknell University. That was memorable. The atom bomb.
You remember the atom bomb?
Mm-hmm. Because that
Right.
just before VJ Day. Assassination of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about the assassination of John F. Kennedy?
I was at work.
Oh yeah, but can you picture the scene?
No.
Were people upset and...
Yes, everyone was very, very upset.
Yeah, very sad time. So do you remember a time before TV?
Yes, because when I was growing up in high school, there were radio programs I used to watch. And I listen to.
Yeah. What radio programs did you used to listen to?
Jack Armstrong and I think The Shadow followed them closely. They came on at appropriate times in my study times.
So do you remember when you saw your first TV? Remember where that was?
Yeah, it was in our house. We had a little television, but in Columbia, when I was in New York, doing my graduate work, Milton Berle was the rage.
So, what was your first job?
First job was a merchandise trainee with a department store in Hartford, Connecticut. My first full-time job.
What, did you have some ideas of what you thought you'd be when you got older? What profession you'd be in?
Not at all. That was just the job available at the time, and I took it.
And how did you end up in the scrap metal business?
Well, I went to work in Washington, D.C. as an economist with the National Production Authority after World War II, and got assigned or volunteered to be in the aluminum division. The agency was winding down, and I thought aluminum looked like a good field, so I interviewed with and was recruited by Kaiser Aluminum, went to work for them in their secondary aluminum operation, which they were running at the time, and worked there for less than a year before they shut that down, and ended up in a secondary aluminum operation in Cleveland, and that's the scrap business and how I ended up in aluminum. Thought there was going to be a great future and growth in the aluminum usage, and there was.
Seems like you were right.
The scrap end was just happened to be a branch that I evolved into by accident.
So do you remember when you got your first car?
Yeah, got it when let's see, I got it when I was in college, and got it with some savings and some help from my dad, a used car, a coupe, from the father of a high school buddy of mine.
And what kind of car was it?
Can't remember.
Do you remember how much it cost?
Yeah, $500.
$500. That must have been a fancy car, $500 back then.
No, this was a couple of years old.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was less.
So how did you meet Mom?
After World War II, when we were back home doing the 2020 club.
Wait, what's the 2020 club?
Government kindly offered veterans who didn't have a job $20 a week. It was the 2052 for a year. And you didn't have to work for it, just say you couldn't find a job. So when we first got out, we were all on the club and just going around enjoying ourselves with the little bit of money we had. And we would go to bars, try to pick up women, but on Sunday, all the bars were closed. So one Sunday we went to a wedding and just crashed it.
You didn't know anybody in the wedding?
No, it was a wedding downtown in a hotel. It was a Jewish wedding. Two buddies and I went in, and there were 3 girls there who were alone at the wedding, and we were so happy to see some young guys there, and that Mom was one of them.
Wow. And then you started dating a lot after that, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah? What was your courtship like?
Hectic.
What was it like going over to her house? We understand she had a lot of brothers and sisters.
Well, I didn't usually go over when there were a lot of people there. But they didn't bother me, and I didn't bother them.
Tell us about your wedding.
It was a lovely wedding in East Hartford, Connecticut, on a grassy hill. Small wedding. And it was very, very nice.
Okay. And did you go on a honeymoon?
Yep. We went down to, drove down to Florida.
So tell us about raising your kids yourself and the wonderful children you ended up with.
Would you repeat that question, please? Without the editorial comment. I didn't raise the kids. Lillian raised the kids. I was working long hours, and any positives that came out of there, I can attribute to her. All the negatives, I claim myself.
Oh, well, we'll have to hear the other side of this story. So what were some of your fond memories since then? How about vacations, or what were some of the highlights?
Well, we've had some lovely trips overseas. The 2 best ones were visiting you in Paris and in Sydney, Australia, where we had lots of time and had a home base that was comfortable. But we had many others that were lovely, driving around Europe, not knowing a foreign language and getting by.
Yeah.
Except at that time, your mother couldn't read maps, and she doesn't do it much better now, so I'd have to drive and read the maps at the same time, and that was difficult.
So going back to your childhood, what do you remember about being Jewish growing up? Did you celebrate the holidays, or did you go to synagogue a lot?
We did go to synagogue a lot. We didn't really join until a couple of years before our bar mitzvah. The preparation for bar mitzvah was terrible. It was an old-fashioned Seder with a rabbi with a ruler. We never joined the synagogue until the kids were born, and we moved to Cleveland. And Lillian insisted, and we joined the synagogue, and from then on we participated for the kids. I don't know whether we would have done it without having children.
And you were active when we were in Benton Harbor. You were active in the synagogue.
Small community, everyone had to do his job, and everyone took his turn. I was fortunate that they chose me to be president for a couple of years.
So who were some of your best friends over the years?
A couple of guys from the neighborhood. One in particular, David Rifkin. We still keep in contact. See practically nobody else anymore. And the other friends were social friends that we met as we grew up. And as the family matured and moved.
Okay. Tell us when you retired.
Retired in, I think it was 85. That's 15 years ago. Oh. In between working, I started my own business and then was very fortunate, and after 8 years was able to retire. Retired in Benton Harbor for 3 or 4 years, and then we decided to move down to Palm Desert in California in 1989.
And you like it there?
I love it there. Weather is actually a very beautiful place to live, very laid back. Weather's gorgeous except for the summer, although we're tolerating the summers better than we did. But as you see, we're up here in beautiful Portola Valley. Is that where we are?
Yeah, that's where we are.
And the temperature is 76 inside the house, and I'm still wearing a jacket, so something's happened to the blood or something.
Okay. You guys have any questions?
First met our darling Marina when she walked off the plane, actually was carried by Donna, San Francisco International Airport.
And what was she like at first?
Same as she is, active and cocky.
Tell about how she walked off the airplane. Or out of customs, I guess.
Donna put her down and we were walking. We had to walk through this mammoth airport. She'd never been on a plane before, we found out. And we had to walk to the car, so we had to walk through an elevator and through a whole crowd of people, and she started walking and fearlessly walked ahead of us, not even looking back, not worried about being in a strange place. And when we made a turn, she was going straight ahead, so we had to call her. And she followed us, sat in the automobile, buckled into the safety seat she'd never seen, the child seat, and away we went.
And what was she like that first month?
She was,
Remember?
yeah, she was very active. Everything she ate she thought was delicious. She fell in love the first week with peas, thought they were great. And one of my fondest memories of the first week was her Uncle Michael brought her over a music box. And it was like a portable radio, and turned it on, and it played music, and her eyes lit up, and she started to say, "Musica, musica," astounded by it, and was completely enthralled with it. Remember that?
No. Never will, never did.
Do you remember Pops trying to speak to you in Russian on a little guidebook? That was my favorite moment, walking in and finding you at the kitchen table, looking at a guidebook, trying to read Russian to her. I said, "Pops, what are you asking her? The directions to Red Square?"
No, she never would teach me Russian. The most Russian I learned was Mishka, which means bear. Right?
Samolot is airplane.
What's airplane?
Samolot.
semi-yoked.
So tell us about what's some memories about Bradley and Jenny when they were little.
Well, Bradley was a little premature, so we had a little concern about him. He was a good kid, and a few times we spent with him when he was a baby, he matured well. Jenny, we were there when he was born, when she was born, and see, it was Bradley we took on the first night out of the hospital. We took him to a Japanese restaurant. He was in a wicker basket right by Lillian's feet, and was a good baby.
Okay, any memories of Jenny you want to share with her?
Jenny, funny kid, a very good kid, very bright.
We'll get the specifics out of Bubby.
Yeah.
Maria, do you have any
I
questions?
don't squeal.
Do you have any questions for Pops? Okay, thanks Pops. We'll get Bubby on. So we're here at Thanksgiving 2000 with my mother, Lillian.
Don't contradict me on anything.
Neither have I.
Now we're going to ask her some of the same questions. They'll be maybe a little different, but we'll try. So you tell us when and where you were born.
Hartford, Connecticut, 1923 in August. One of, at the time I was born, I had 2 older brothers and 1 older sister, but I am one of 10 children, as you know.
Yes, I do. So, tell us about, we're going to get back to them, okay? So tell us, what was your earliest memory?
I think my earliest memory was probably when I was 4 or 5 years old. We moved frequently, and it was one of the times we lived on the south side of Hartford, Connecticut, in a tenement. And my earliest memory is of my mother and father being bootleggers and selling illegal booze out of our house. People would come and ring the doorbell, and my mother would give them a pint, and they would give my mother cash, which was put under a mattress. That's my earliest memory of my family.
Now, was it true that your grandfather went to jail for that?
My mother
I mean, your
went
father.
to jail. My father did not go to jail.
Well, your mother
My
went.
mother went to jail.
How?
My mother was arrested.
Why?
and
What did
was
she
sent
do
to
wrong?
jail. Although my father was a bootlegger, she was doing something that was against the law. And she went to jail for 3 months. It should have been my father, but my mother was the one that was caught. So my mother went to jail. They raided our house, and my mother was home, not my father.
So what did you guys do while your mother was in jail?
My sister Ida, who was we were all very, very young, but Ida was really good. And my father just took care of us
Oh,
for
okay.
3 months. Yeah,
Right,
it was,
okay.
you know, but that's my earliest memory.
So tell me where you grew up.
I grew up in and around Hartford, Connecticut. We moved frequently because we were very poor, and my father did not hold a job. And so we moved frequently. There were 13 elementary schools in Hartford, Connecticut. We went to all of them. And it didn't seem to hurt us at all.
So tell us some of your happy memories growing up.
Well, it was a very difficult, we really had a very, very difficult childhood. There were very, very few happy memories of my childhood. It was always a struggle. My father was ill, had cancer, was a cancer survivor in a day when cancer patients didn't live, and he did not work for many years, and we were on welfare. And it was a very, very hard struggle. All of us, my 2 brothers, my sister, not my sister, but I, were all offered full-time scholarships to college because my brothers were wonderful athletes, so they were offered scholarships for athletics, and I was offered a scholarship to Smith, full scholarship for 4 years, everything paid, which I could not accept because of my family. I mean, I had to go to work. None of my memories of my childhood are very pleasant.
Now, I remember some about dancing and card games and
Well,
stuff like that.
we always played cards. There was always a card game going on, and my brothers were good dancers. We were all good dancers. We used to dance to the radio, but it was still very, very hard. We moved frequently, and it was very difficult.
Okay.
But we were all very, very good friends, and we were really a very, very close family. We really cared about each other.
Tell me more about your parents.
My mother and father both came from Russia. My mother came when she was 13 and came all alone. Her parents had been all killed in Russia. My father his family had all left Russia and gone to different places. He had brothers that went to South America. He came to the United States. My mother had one brother in Hartford, Connecticut that she came to. And she met my father when she was like 15 years old, and they married when she was 16 and my father was 17.
Wow.
They married. They were married very, very young.
So tell us their names and their
My
parents'
mother's
names.
name was Anna Miller, and my father always said he had not changed his name, but his name was Samuel Darling. He was very, very handsome. He was very charismatic. Everybody loved him. He had friends all over, all over. He was just a very, very popular guy. A lousy father, a lousy husband, but a good friend to many people.
So did you know his parents then?
No, his parents, no one knew, none of his brothers, nobody. They went to South America. So we never met his family until maybe 15, 20 years ago. One of my father's nieces contacted us, contacted one of my brothers and sisters, and now they see them regularly. They live in New Jersey. But no, I never met any of them.
And you didn't know your mother's parents either?
No, but I knew my mother's brother. My mother had a brother living in Hartford, Connecticut, and his name was Hyman, and he had a wife, her name was Rose, and 3 children, and those were pretty much our only relatives.
Wow. So tell me about the siblings and what it was like to grow up with 9 brothers and sisters.
Actually, they were really, we never argued, we never had a fight about a telephone or a bathroom, and I can't ever remember growing up with more than one bathroom in the house for all of us, or more than one telephone for all of us. But there were never, ever, ever any problems.
So how'd you sleep? Did you have like dorm rooms of all the girls and all the boys?
We had a room for the girls and a room for the boys and a room for my mother and father.
3-bedroom house, 10 children and 2
Yeah,
parents.
well, it was usually a tenement with all the rooms being used as bedrooms except the kitchen. Until the service when my brothers, when my brother Muzzy, who was second from the oldest, bought our first house. We never owned a house. He had a little business that he sold gasoline, and when he was drafted, he sold this business for $600. And we again were in flux. We were looking for a place to live, and we had been evicted again, and the family was actually separated. The only time that family was ever separated was during the first year of World War II, where we were staying with friends or with my mother's brother. At any rate, my brother Muzzy bought a house in Glastonbury, Connecticut for $600 down. It was a little 3-bedroom Cape Cod house out in the country, and it was the first time we'd ever owned a house or had a place to ourselves. And at that point, I was already working for a furniture company. So I furnished the entire house from the furniture company. And with my salary, I would pay it off every week.
So
and we lived there for the whole war. And then when my brothers came back to the service, we sold that house, took the money from that house, and bought a house in the city, in Hartford. And it was a big house. It was a big old house. And we moved into that house. And by that time, there were all 10 of us.
all 10 of you living together at once. Wow. So you've told us some stories in the past about like people coming to the table looking for your brother Muzzy. And
Oh yeah. Well, everyone was welcome in our house. We really had nothing, but we never ever had just my family there. There were always other people at our table in our house. Always people. There was always a card game going on. There was always something doing in our house just because there were so many of us. And my brothers had lots of friends, and we had lots of friends, and my younger brothers and sisters had lots of friends. So there were always people in our house.
So what do you remember of world events? What are some of your earlier memories or some of the...
Well, I can only remember Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I remember how terrible things were generally in our neighborhood people were really and truly, people were on welfare, people were bread lines. I mean, it was really horrible, and I really have very vivid memories of that. And my first memory of a president actually was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and our neighborhood just practically, when he died, the neighborhood was totally devastated. I mean, all of the Jewish people and the Italians were just totally devoted to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that was my first memory was really of everyone crying and carrying on as though the world had ended.
Yeah, he was a great president.
For them, he was.
Yeah. How about other presidents that were you thought were great presidents?
Well, I always liked Harry Truman. I thought he was not political. That was my view of Harry Truman. I thought Johnson was absolutely a terrible president, although he certainly did accomplish a lot of great things, but I certainly, for one, did not like him. So he was never high in my regard. Of course, I thought Kennedy was terrific for the short time that he was in office.
Do you remember where you were on the day JFK died?
Yes, I was in a department store and walked by the television department, and all of the television suddenly had on the death of Kennedy. Everyone in that department just stopped. People were stopping and crying. And the funniest thing about that is when I got home and you kids were at school and you came home and we were talking about the death of Kennedy, and I can't remember which of you said to me, was it like this when Abraham Lincoln died? I said, well, I quite don't remember that.
That must have been me.
I don't really remember which it was.
Do you remember a time before TV?
Yes, and I remember when we got a TV, it was just like an occasion. We would all sit for hours watching this thing, and the thing actually we watched most was, well, Al then was at Columbia, and I was already going with him, and he would come home weekends, and all he would talk about would be Milton Berle. He would go to a bar every Tuesday night just to watch Milton Berle on this television set, and so we had to watch Milton Berle, and wrestling was a big thing in those days, in the late 40s. Wrestling was big, and my mother was a wrestling fan, so we watched a lot of wrestling, but those are really the two programs I remember most being watched.
So what was your first job?
My first job, well, did a lot of babysitting at a very young age. I started maybe when I was 9 years old, babysitting.
Wow.
And in those days, not only would you babysit, but you'd have to clean your house. So I would do that. Everyone in my family did that. And my first job was working for a neighbor. They had they had an office furniture place, and he was teaching me how to help him with the books. So I used to help him with the books. But my first full-time job was for a furniture store. And I worked for them for a couple of years, and also worked at the same time, had another job where I worked for an auto dealer doing his books, because my father and my brothers were in the automobile used car business. And so I had this job doing their books, so I had two jobs that I worked. Those were my first jobs.
So did you imagine yourself having a career, or did you expect you'll have a family?
No, I never really thought in those terms. The big thing was to work and keep the family together.
So did you have a car or yourself?
I did have a car. I had my first car when we lived in Glastonbury, Connecticut. It was during World War II. My father was in the used car business, and he had a little Ford convertible that he had taken in trade, and I bought that car. It was absolutely the cutest thing with a rumble seat. I loved it. I would never put the roof down. Even in the rain, I'd put up an umbrella. I loved that car. That was my first car.
Do you remember how much it cost?
I can't remember. It could not have been a lot of money.
Yeah. So tell us your version of how you met Dad.
I was at my cousin's wedding, and he came in with 2 other guys, and I thought he was really good looking. He was tall, very tall, seemed to me, for me, who was short, not used to all these tall men. At any rate, came over and asked me to dance, and then we found out we lived in the neighborhood, and all of the other two guys lived in the neighborhood, and we would at first all go out together, but then we kind of got paired off, and that's how it was.
Okay. And tell us about your wedding.
It was very small. I had to pay for my own wedding, since my family had no money, and so we just had it at it was like a recreation center in East Hartford, Connecticut, that you could rent for the day. And it was just his immediate family. We have to quit.
Yeah. All right. So
Let me see what is right there, huh?
go.